Welcome to the Queer Spirit Podcast. We're your hosts, Nick Fenagoni
and Tanya Marco Viodo. Our Queer Spirit podcast spotlights queer artists, healers, practitioners, activists, and beings
who share their work and magic with our LGBTQIA, two-spirit, trans, and gender nonconforming communities and the collective. Our guest today is Jonathan Coe, host of Healing the Spirit podcast, for our second cross-pollination episode. Jonathan is a queer astrologer, diviner, and alchemist of the subtle realm. Their work aims to empower fellow shapeshifters, visionaries, and intuitives in remembering their essence, cultivating skills in being present with the ever-changing nature of reality, and weaving sincere, loving kinships with the world, even when the world has broken our hearts.
We invite Jonathan to ground us in, and then we begin exploring the energies of healing and queerness, including their intersections within our practices. We discuss the potent medicines of collaboration and care, and how we cultivate and share them with our communities. Jonathan weaves his magic of astrology into the conversation as a lens for healing our queer spirits.
You can follow Jonathan's weekly astrological contemplations and conversations with friends on their podcast, Healing the Spirit, wherever you listen to podcasts. Find them at jonathancoe.com. That's jonathankoe.com.
All right. So I have Nick and Tanya Mark here with me. And first and foremost, just deep gratitude for both of you for this beautiful invitation for collaboration that just feels so deeply aligned and so nourishing to me already. And yeah, as we mentioned prior to the recording, let's begin with a little grounding. And for those listening, we invite you to also participate in whatever ways feel available. Oftentimes, when I think about my early days of my grounding practice, I have heard a lot of different things like, oh, you can't ground while you're driving your car or while you're doing other things. But I would remind us all to remember that we are Earth and that we not only live on Earth and belong to Earth, but we are Earth. And so, yeah, allowing that to be our first step towards grounding, beginning to bring our awareness to different parts of the body, different parts of our energetic system, and allow our awareness to start creating harmony and coherence naturally without any active action. And don't forget to breathe, allowing your belly to breathe with you, opening up space in the back, opening up space in the neck, and if it's part of your practice, if it feels in alignment with you today, starting to feel the lower parts of your body, the parts that are connected to the surface that is below you. And beginning to melt your awareness to start and merge with the frequency of the earth. The earth is alive. The earth shows up in many different ways. And trusting whatever you are receiving at this moment is precisely correct for you. Allowing your body to be aware of its own unique grounding at this moment. If you are tuned in to the visual, perhaps you notice roots or maybe the trunk of a tree or a grounding cord if you sense things, noticing the resonance between your belly button and the belly button of the earth, your heart and the heart of the earth. And allowing your breath to shape shift into whatever feels the most supportive and nourishing for this time and for this container. Allowing your body to breathe one last deep breath for you here. Perhaps opening your eyes if you had them closed. Giving yourself a hug and arriving in the space.
Ooh la la. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ashe, that was just so, thank you, Jonathan. We are so grateful that the three of us have come together. It just feels like that's what it feels like. It feels like this combination of old friends coming together in some form of reunion, and also this combo of like an extended recess from school where the three of us come together and get to kind of play in a really beautiful way, but also coming together. And I think that's such a beautiful combination. And it's interesting because the three of us have spent a bit of time together before coming here today, right? Kind of cultivating and kind of exploring. And I think it's really beautiful and kind of unusual, at least in my minimal podcasting experience, to come, the title of an episode shows up before the actual episode is recorded. And in my meditative practice, that's exactly what happened on an eve before one of the times the three of us got together, was that I received this beautiful download that, for all listeners, Jonathan Coe's podcast, Healing the Spirit, and our episode of the queer spirit, I had a download that healing the queer spirit might be a title that we wanted to explore. So I brought that to one of our shared times together. And here we are saying, this is how we want to start, is what the universe, or as you would say, or spirit kind of guided us, is that we felt that we would start with that, healing the queer spirit, and that that's what we were called to somehow share time and space today, ebbing and flowing and doing what we do and sharing. So thank you to each of you for being open to receiving my download and allowing that to drive some of our shared time today. I appreciate you both.
Thank you, Tanya Mark. I feel immediately drawn to that title of Healing the Queer Spirit. And I was telling both of you that I was listening to the conversation recently. I think it was November 2023 of your episode on your podcast, where the two of you were really just jamming and talking about your connection and how you collaborate. And there was something about that episode that felt so powerful and so medicinal to me, and really speaks to the ethos of, yeah, the spirit of this being that you both are co-creating with your podcast. And I think there's something about how the two of you approach your queerness with reverence, but also levity and care, that just feels so nourishing to me and feels like a beautiful opportunity to put some of the ways of being that I've been embodying and I've been wanting to create outlet for in this world that I don't always get a chance to talk about. And so this collaboration feels like that opportunity. So thank you. Mhm.
Jonathan, I'm curious if you're open to sharing. It sounds like there might be an idea or something that you feel like maybe holds you back from expressing that more fully. And I think that that is something that a lot of queer people, including myself, have felt like, ooh, I want to put this thing out there in a certain way that feels good to me. And if it feels good to me as a queer person, it's probably going to feel good to other queer people. But I'm also just like, I'm not sure like what that is. And I'm curious like what your experience has been with that, if that's true.
Yeah, I mean, this is the story of my life. I feel like for me, queerness, queerness really is about that uniqueness, right? That we all have, and how that uniqueness really doesn't fit into any boxes. you know? And there's a specificity to our way of being that I think is often lost in the translation of how we run ourselves as a society. And I guess to maybe ground it in my own personal experience, what I've often noticed is there are so many ways, there are infinite ways of being queer. And even within the queer community itself, part of how we run from the trauma response of being in a world that doesn't always honor our unique, specific wisdom and medicine is that we then impose these ways of being onto others. Like there's a standard of like how queer are you? You know, there's like a what I like to call like the modern queer starter pack. You know, that it's like if you miss that module, you're not queer enough, you know? And part of I think why speaking about queerness is so challenging is because I'm not trying to create a queer starter pack because I want people to find their own. And yeah, I am even wary of creating template. And to me, what is more empowering than just fully embodying it? You know, I think a lot about this astrologically because to me, Aquarius and Pisces are both very queer signs, you know, and think a lot about how Aquarius often seen as the rebel because Aquarius is connected to aware of the standards and is performing a certain kind of rebellion or moving away from the ways that the standard is limiting, right? And there's a quality of like, oh, the sweater is too tight for me, you know? But then the Pisces archetype to me just kind of swims away, you know, isn't even thinking about the sweater anymore. It's like, what sweater? You know, and in some ways, for me, like, how much more radical can you be than like actually living as if the sweater doesn't exist,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So,
It's almost like what I'm hearing you say is that to be fully authentic is queer, which may initial thought may sound like an oxymoron, but I think that, we live, I don't know. I feel like there's lots of different pockets of the world and it's expressing itself in a lot of different ways. But I think a lot of parts of the world, people feel like they can't be authentic, at least not 100%. And they have to put themselves into a box in order to be a certain way, and I think that's also part of what's the churning, especially in our culture right now around trans rights and people's pushback just even against pronouns. It's like, well, that doesn't fit into the box that I have or the box that I was programmed with or, my hetero starter pack, right? So, like, how do we break free from that, not just within ourselves, but within our culture and just be authentic in whatever that is?
I appreciate what you both are dropping in aspect of queerness because I feel like you both are dropping these really potent parts of the algorithm. And then it makes me think of my journey in queerness, right? And being raised not in an environment where being out there wasn't a pathway for me in that story, right? And there were all of these expectations or boxes around how to just be. And then coming into my queerness in my early 20s, also being very shocked that there was also somehow these boxes that even queer people were asking me to check, that it had, well, are you this or are you this? And are you this? And I was just like, holy moly, I just got here. Like, meaning, do I get a moment? Like, well, I just came from a fucking place that had me checking boxes that I did not associate to. Like, do I get, where's my padding here? And to me, I feel like a lot of my healing around queerness has been exactly what you both are naming, is that queerness is just being our authentic selves in as many areas of our life as possible. And that my hope is that queerness is this idea of being our authentic selves and whom we care about, how we connect to people, how we're called to be of service. All you can just like fill in those blanks with whatever works, And I think that's such a healing, very healing, especially, we have this younger generation. I know I sound so like the younger generation of queerness that I think is important. I really do, because it lights this ember in the old queerness that I think is very necessary for change. Like, also, yeah, I get it. It might be uncomfortable, but also, isn't this what queerness is about? And that we have people that are saying, like, this is who I am. This is how I ebb and flow. And, don't we, as generations that have come before, have this we have an invitation to respond to that and to unlearn and learn, right? And I think that that also creates huge opportunities for a lot of healing that goes in all many directions. So, yeah.
Yeah, Tanya Mark, I think you're naming, sort of what we're talking about here is healing the queer spirit, right? How do we, I worry when I think about wholeness of like wholeness is coming back together, but also we're talking about like how do we allow the wholeness of everything, not the wholeness of like consolidating into one or into two, a binary, but how do we heal the collective in all of its little tiny pieces. I'm thinking like a cloud, you can't fit into a box. It's just like,
Yeah. Yeah, the word healing is interesting because I think it carries a lot of charge. And I was very resistant when the name of my podcast came through because I was like, I wanted a cooler name, just to be completely straight up. Like, I wanted one that makes me sound more Aquarian. But but I was like, okay, we're gonna play with this. And something I have really noticed about our relationship with healing is how much even just that word itself carries so many connotations that can be unpacked. And in the process of unpacking, I think something happens, right? To me, true healing is not a mental concept. True healing happens in the body, in the spirit. It happens in the relationship. Sometimes it happens in the mind too, right? Sometimes it happens in the ways that we see things, we name things, and we put things into frameworks. But very often, healing doesn't look the way that we want it to look. Healing doesn't look the way we think it needs to look. And so, um, when I think about healing, I think about presence. And when I think about the queer spirit, I think often about the erasure that has happened throughout history of this reality, this dimensional reality that our ancestors always knew to be part of who we are as humans. And yet, because of all the ways that we've created do's and don'ts and shoulds and should nots in societies, right, in the name of progress, we put our queerness to the side because there's an uncomfortable, maybe even seemingly superfluous aspect to queerness. Like to me, queerness is that which falls in the cracks, right? And so when we can't make sense of it in a neat way, it becomes the enemy to progress. It becomes the enemy to productivity, and we push it away. Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I know that even just in like the marketing that Tanya Mark and I do, we try to not really use that word because of the different charge or the connotation around it. And when I think about healing, I think that especially in Western culture, we have this very like sort of an expectation about what, quote unquote healing looks like for each person. And I think because of Western medicine and allopathic medicine, there's been this box put around it. And so some ways like what I'm thinking about right now is we have to queer healing before we can heal the queer spirit, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I think what you're talking
Absolutely.
about is queering healing, and that, someone may go to a doctor or a practitioner and hope for some kind of healing.
Mm.
And maybe, they don't get the cure that they think that they wanted, but they get something else that they never expected. And I think that releasing expectation around what healing is or looks like for each individual in each case is important, and looking and allowing someone to actually heal beyond what they thought needed healing.
Man, I love this idea of, it kind of sits with me as like healing being this living, breathing energy, this invitation, right? And we get the agency. The queerness in it is the invitation is that we get the agency to explore that in ways that ebb and flow for us. What I come back to, something that has really resonated with me, and I don't know if I've shared this with you, Jonathan, is that new to your podcast are your contemplations, right? Where you just come on your own and you share what's in your heart space, spirit space, magic space. And I feel like they're invitations to say, like, you don't have to understand every single aspect of what's happening planetarily. There's an invite to, because it is having an impact, right, on things. But I love how you bring in this medicine of contemplation, which is an incredibly potent medicine in any form of healing, is the invite for us to go internally, right? Because that's a very sustainable change can really happen. A very potent change can happen if we work from the inside out, right? From the roots up kind of thing. And I love contemplations. To me really have me, it's part of mapping and looking at, ooh, la la, like how, ooh, the one that's sticking with me right now. And I have to say this, your most recent episode that talks about embracing our calling as its own energy and asking and putting it out there to the world. I'm like, that doesn't get any more queer than that. I felt like I'm like, ah, shit, yes, thank you for saying this. And also, like, because I think, again, there's this invite of healing can look like what we're doing right now, coming together, the three of us, in itself is its own iteration of healing. And I think queerness, queering the healing, is saying, like, that we get rid of the boxes, and that it's an invite of truly what's intentional, intention, alignment. Oh, this is so rich. I'm just like, ah.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that in, Tanya Mark, because even right now, what I'm really feeling in this present moment is how radical that these three queer people with very different experiences living in different coasts of this continent get to have and share space, get to have this conversation and share space. And it's like, I think about our ancestors who are queer, who may not have other queer people in their immediate community, and how that feeling of standing out or not fully being seen or having another person be like, I see your experience. I see who you are. I see what you're doing, and how there's such a deep longing for that. And to me, the queer spirit carries that longing, right? And wants to know and be known, and to find spaces where they don't have to justify themselves, where they can just be in the creative energy of their being, which I feel so potently in this little triangle between the three of us. I'm also thinking about collaboration and just really honoring the collaborative spirit that I've seen the two of you cultivating in your connection, and the practices that have been holding that collaborative spirit, right? Because it's one thing to be connected to that spirit, but I think it's another to create space and practices and communities where that spirit can be explored, right? And to me, collaboration is deeply queer as well, because in collaboration, there's something about allowing ourselves to be our full selves, but in interaction and in interdependence with the other. And therefore, in that process, creating friction and tension and excitement, right? That isn't otherwise possible. Like, I'm so aware at this moment of the ways in which your presence, both of your presence, is really shifting how I'm showing up. Even maybe the tone of my voice, my presence, right? Um, Earlier I mentioned feeling emboldened by your exploration of the queer spirit in ways that it's not that I don't feel emboldened in my own project, but I may have a different agenda, or I may be called towards a different kind of exploration than this one. That your presence is kind of helping highlight something within me that isn't usually what I lead with. But there, therein lies the beauty of collaboration, right? I'm curious to hear if any of you would like to share a little bit about the ways that collaboration has opened up space for knowing the self, knowing the other, and knowing the community for the two of you in this project.
Well, I can definitely speak to that. And I'm sure Tanya Mark has their own ideas too. But yeah, so for a while, for the last, I don't know, 12 years or so, I've been interested and curious in exploring collaboration. And I've done a few smaller collaborations with other people, maybe like one-time events or I collaborated with a friend who at the time was a yoga teacher and invited me in to offer sound healing during their yoga class. And we ended up doing a monthly event that we did for about a year and a half, which did pretty well. And the only reason we stopped is because we lost the space that we were doing it in. And then, I started this podcast a few years ago and after a few years was getting a little bit burned out with it, and so was open to the idea of, do I want to stop? Do I want to give it away to someone? I had two people actually ask me if they either could collaborate or take it over without me even offering it. I thought that's interesting. And then I met Tanya Mark about, I guess it's been almost 2 years now, and we started collaborating on a couple little things, and then our connection just grew and have really enjoyed, getting to know them and, seeing what we have in common and where we overlap. And then also in our difference and celebrating our differences in our experience, our past, our history, our identity, and our practices and our communities. And to me, that was really exciting as a way to, as we talked about, like expanding the rainbow and, really queering it up. Like me as a cis-ish, white guy, that there's more out there than just my own experience, my own history, and also there's more people out there than the people that I'm reaching. And so I really wanted to bring, to expand the reach. And so it's been a really beautiful thing to collaborate with Tanya Mark. And, also as therapist, I know that any kind of dyadic relationship can bring up, you know, challenges and force us to look at our own stuff and to really bring consciousness to it. And I've also appreciated the way that Tanya Mark and I have held space for each other as we've gone through. I wouldn't say we've had growing pains, but we have moments where we stretch, right? And it's been really amazing to like be able to do that with someone who's so conscious also and like made space for each other. So I don't know what you want to say, Tanya Mark.
I'm just appreciating the tenderness of Jonathan's question and hearing your response, Nick, and like just feeling the warmth of it. And I think the truth of it is to me that, and I realize this as a person that just existing in this world, that I feel like care and collab are just part of my fucking DNA. I think I've always functioned as a human being, like, someone being an athlete and participating in teams and having some of the best and worst fucking experiences of my life. You know what I mean? But like when I look back in my story, like there's been these aspects of collab, and one of them being I found the rooms of 12 step at a very early age at 19. I had a adolescent substance, misuse little journey there in the short part of my adolescence. And when I found recovery at such an early age, that room is really built on, the original foundation is built on two people coming together to support their recovery, right? It's built on the medicine of collab, that you don't have to do this alone kind of idea. So I feel like I spent 30 plus years in those aspects, both shadowy and light aspects. I no longer participate in the group, but again, another iteration of coming together and not having to do things alone. I also was an educator for almost 20 years in the educational system, and my idea of collab there was very fucking queer, because I was like, I want to teach coding and web design and all of these things, and I want to work with the students. They are the stars. I'm going to share this language. So again, this idea of collab, care, and leaving both of those systems, just so y'all know, and very late in my life, like, in the latter part of my life, is scarier than shit, because those are two big, really, systems that I participated in for so long. So the truth is, in part of my healing, I recognized through one of my teachers that singing was a part of my medicine, that's something I just explored very privately. And so, the kind of teachers and mentors I work with, they nudge and they're like, well, how else can and I go into meditation. Okay, universe, how else can I blah, blah, blah? And the universe shows this class, advertisement for this music class with Linda Arnold. And then that leads to devotional voice. And in the background of my life, behind the scenes, I'm this being that's saying, holy shit, I have let go of everything at a latter part of my life, things that I've belonged to. And I recognized back then, very scary. Now I feel liberated as fuck. But back then it was like, oh my God, how do you start over socially? Because listen, my everything that I did socially, romantically, everything came from the rooms of 12 step in a very small circle of, not large community quantity, but that's where a lot of my life took place. And when you take that out of my personal algorithm, I was left with like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? And start over. And finding Nick in devotional voice class, I felt was just the universe saying, like, again, you're not alone. And, having the opportunity for us to come together in person and for us to kind of see each other. There's just something that happens. There's something magical when we come together, and no longer being part of a system that said, you're look this way, you shouldn't be interacting with gay men, like all of that shit no longer being a part of my algorithm, just being completely open to saying like, hello, I see you, and just trusting in that, to me was this huge step. I know for me personally, because it was like, well, I don't know, and a lot of times with this, I subscribe to the medicine of every no brings you closer to a yes. And so I do, and I fucking believe in it so much so, and I believe that the universe brought me to Nick. It was a yes, you know what I mean? And it was a really potent yes, in a way that if you would have told me that Nick and I coming together would have led to this and this, I would have been like, what? And to me, I feel like this is two queer beings coming together, not just for their own personal sake, but recognizing that we have shit that's broken within our own queer systems. And these circles are a collective response to that, coming together and saying like, we understand that care is important. We understand that queer spaces are so fucking important for so many reasons. And we care about ourselves, and we also care about our collective. And, this podcast being something too, like another opportunity for us to come together, shine the lights on one another, that it doesn't have to be this. There's no verses. I love the medicine of it's like, let's shine the lights on each other. And then that just makes us fucking more shinier. You know what I mean? And amplifies us. So yeah, that's my very long-winded response to that. I believe that collab is just a medicine that's been built into me, and I understand it in a way that's really fucking important and potent. And I love sharing it. And so I'm super grateful for folks like you and Nick that come in, because y'all are, you're like, I see you too. And then we're just like, okay, yay.
Yeah, it's really profound. Mm-hmm.
I also think that, collaboration in 2 is just the beginning, right? And then you have collaboration in 3, like we're doing now, or collaboration in group or in circle or community. And that, coming back to like the topic of our show today, our conversation of healing the queer spirit, I think that especially for queer people who have had so many experiences of being ostracized or abandoned or othered or oppressed by their families or communities or their countries, where they feel like they're on their own, that we are modeling that you don't have to be on your own, and how to come back to relationship, whether it's in 2 or 3 or 10 or 50 or whatever, but that can be healing. But, there's a lot that needs to happen, especially for people who have been rejected and othered, that they don't trust, and so it's about how do we slowly melt the wound, heal the wounds, and melt the ice of, those experiences to sort of come back to trust, so we can connect and trust and sort of feel safe enough letting someone in, right? And I know that, those things come up in small little ways, even just in, my collaborations with Tanya Mark of like sharing power, that's a big thing. Like, how do you do that in a way that feels, equitable and that we both get our needs met and have joy in that experience?
How do you do that? May I ask? I'm very curious.
I think just through true transparency and well, I guess I'm not sure which part of that you're asking what I do, but I guess I'll just say for myself through trial and error, and taking little steps and being, coming back to what we were saying, being vulnerable and authentic and, and speaking our truth and also holding a heart of compassion and care, so that the other person feels safe doing that too.
And the ingredient I will add to that is fucking joy. We have fun. We have fun and joy together. I was trying, not that calculations matter, but we spend a couple of times during the week together talking about circles, curating, talking about what's going on planetary. We have fun. The same practices we bring into circle, we share together, and we do so. And I think that is, joy is certainly something we bring into our circles as well. And I think it's an important, potent medicine that is so important to any aspect of healing, but especially in queerness, because of all, there's so many things that can be so intense, and joy is such a potent medicine, I think, to bring in any kind of way, because I think it's a medicine that's a response that, a lot of shit happens when we're in joyful spaces and we're sharing laughter. There's so much going on energetically that is important. It doesn't always have to look like the coined word of work, if you will. Like joy is part of it. And I think Nick and I spending time together, getting to know one another, getting to learn one another, unlearn one another, having our moments, there's always the ingredient of joy as well.
Wow. I'm just in awe, and I feel all that both of you are sharing in my heart space. It feels so nourishing to receive. Hmm. Yeah, I think the piece you were mentioning earlier, Nick, about trust is very interesting because, this is making me think also about like where we are in the journey of our lives, right? And something I have always heard, even as a child, was how, everybody is always looking at me and saying, wow, you are so mature, but there's only so much you can go through. And it feels to me like part of that maturation is also time, that sometimes, like in where I'm at in my life, I'm currently 34. I feel like I came out of, needing to hide my queerness in my teens and, coming into my queerness in my early 20s. But looking back at that moment, this was circa 2010-ish when I came out to people and to family and friends. There was such a lack of infrastructure around the kind of queerness that actually resonates with me. It was almost like I just got out of one box that totally didn't belong to me, and then I had to get into another box that doesn't fit, but I have to pretend that it fits because otherwise, what else? Which other box do I belong in, right? And I guess a part of me is aware that probably both of you also went through these periods, right? Of like going from one box to another and hopefully throughout the life, expanding that more and more, right? And I think I'm only coming to an awareness now of what my queerness actually looks like, and validating that for myself, because I think part of that trust too is trusting your timing, right? Like you can't trust other people if you don't even trust your own timing. Like there's a way in which you are available to something or not available to something depending on the timing, and all of that is so tender and true, and I think needs a certain level of protection that we don't always get in the ways that we grow up in this culture.
I want to just invite us to take a breath We've just all shared a
Mm.
lot, together, taking a breath.
Now you're speaking my language now. Some of my magic here, some of my favorite. Yeah.
And maybe have our listeners just take a breath just to really take all that in.
Yeah, and I'd like to add as we do that, yeah, just connecting to our breath and just giving that a greeting, maybe a little shift in our position that could be wiggling in the toes or fingers, a little roll in the shoulders. All of this beautiful, potent energy as we inhale, bringing that energy in, and as we exhale, sharing it with our system. Here in Clear Spirit, I like to share that energy can be sticky, sticky, sticky as fuck. So we also here, as we're spending time together today, are releasing. And so finding a bit of movement, bringing it back to that beautiful grounding point that Jonathan started is that we can take any of that stickiness and just let it go.
Ah, thank you for that breath, Tanya Mark. In this realm of healing or the idea of healing, Jonathan, sort of coming back to your podcast and your contemplations and your work with astrology, I'm curious, like how you sort of maybe weave in, if at all, maybe you don't, but how you see working with astrology could be healing, perhaps
Mm.
even in a queer way.
Ooh, I love this
Oh,
question. This is so juicy. I felt my whole system lighting up. What I've been thinking about a lot recently is how astrology to me is a system that's so potent in helping us cultivate grounded sight. And I want to take a little bit of time to explain what that is. I keep coming back to this quote. I think it's attributed to Anais Nin, which is, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And to me, astrology is a beautiful language and tool that can help reconnect us to our inherent connection with the cosmos, right? Because when we think about us on Earth here, we cannot be on Earth if there's no sun that constellates the solar system. We can't be here without Jupiter, who is essentially protecting us from asteroids just hurling at us, right, by virtue of its gravity. And so we are always in a dance, and we may not feel it, and our sciences may not yet be able to catch up with it, but we are connected. And so to me, astrology is such a beautiful lens because it recognizes that connection and it creates this codified way that we can start playing with our perception and with our sight. And astrology gives name and gives significations. It gives a certain way of systematizing reality, which is inherently something you can't systematize, right? Reality is queer. Reality is numinous. You can't systematize reality, but astrology attempts. And in the attempt, I think we get to clarify aspects of our experience that wouldn't otherwise be possible. Without the language, it's a lot harder, right? I think about this in terms of my own chart. Like, I'm a Virgo rising. Something that I experience on a regular basis is overwhelm. I see a lot, I pick up on a lot, I perceive a lot. And the way that I deal with overwhelm in my own day-to-day reality is I make lists. I break it down into smaller pieces. And to me, astrology does something very similar in that rather than just kind of looking at the energy and being like, whoa, look at all this ocean, right? I can point to, oh, look at Venus and Mars entering into their domicile signs next week. What does that make me think of, right? And in the process of having the hands and the fingers of the planetary ancestors, as one of my teachers, Ari Felix, would say, it helps us digest our experience a little bit more. And in the digestion of our experience, I think we get to parse out what is truly ours to digest and to be with, and what isn't really ours, and what we can delegate to this greater web of life, right? That certain strivings, certain conditions, certain grief joy are really meant to be held communally and not just the human community, but the greater community of the alive cosmos. And I think astrology for me is both a practice of delineation and surrender. In the delineation, there is surrender, right? There's a paradoxical quality to it. And so to bring it back to contemplation, to me, it's so powerful to be looking at astrology because astrology is infinitely, it's just not possible to kind of pinch astrology into like a tiny little box, right? Like the way that I think about the astrology of the summer is going to be very different than the way that Tanya Mark is going to look at it because we're different human beings. It's channeled through our being. And so to me, that recognition of the collaboration of us and the cosmos is what's actually at the heart of astrology. Astrology isn't about right or wrong. Astrology is about what do you see? And how is it that what you see assists you with being with your experience with deeper presence?
Oh
Off
my
the
gosh.
soapbox.
Yeah, that's amazing. Are you kidding? I'm just like, oh, so much medicine in what you dropped. And I love how you just dropped on that end of the collab with us and the cosmos and the collab that medicine around that and how it's all this invitation. And I think your work in astrology and the way in which you share about it and the way in which you're so sacred and reverent, it's just like, so beautifully queer and very liberating. I would like to ask Jonathan, because in addition to your contemplations, you are always inviting folks and guests. You also practice collab medicine by bringing folks into your platform. And I was just wondering if you could kind of speak to, the medicine of collab for you and what that has
Mm.
looked like.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm bringing in something that Nick mentioned earlier, which was trial and error. I find that I'm so attracted to collaborating because there's a way in which you see yourself in the presence of other people that you can't when you're just by yourself. I really feel that. And I want to be careful not to universalize that because I don't think that's everybody's experience. I have plenty of friends who don't experience that, but I do experience that. I feel myself more in relationships. I feel myself more in collaborations, in even group or communal settings rather than when I'm just by myself. Sometimes when I'm by myself, Jonathan feels so numinous. I'm like, I don't even know what to fucking do with any of this stuff. Like, this is so crazy. So, the presence of others always feels so deeply regulating to me and very medicinal. And what I've learned from having so many different conversations on the podcast is the beauty of being with, as in, not just witnessing, but like witnessing, like being with the other person and giving myself full permission to see people as they are rather than seeing people as I am. Because I found that in my own daily reality, I have needs, I have desires, I have restrictions, constrictions that sometimes makes it very hard for me to see what the other person is trying to say. But for whatever reason, when I'm doing my podcast, when I'm doing a reading, I don't have that. It's like that filter is gone. Like the Jonathan who is, let's just call it like the egoic Jonathan is gone. Like I'm just here because I'm excited to share space. I am moved by the inspiration and the container, and I feel fully present. And in being fully present, I think something happens and something emerges. And the other day, I heard something about how somebody said actually learning how to listen is such a powerful skill because the listener makes the speaker. That's something that really resonates with me. And I'm just like, whoa, mind blown. Because it's taken me a while to get to that point of like validating that sometimes what I'm interested in is really just being a mirror to the other person. And often in my conversations, in my collaborations, when I'm bringing in folks for conversations, I'm really more interested in how they think and why they think, how they are and why they are rather than what they are or what they think. Like to me, the content itself is not always fully relevant because I think the being is what's more interesting. And I try to encapsulate that in my conversations and I let that kind of flow through the conversation space. And what I'm learning is that we are inherently relational beings as humans, and we shape one another in these spaces. And the more we're able to make space for ourselves, and the more we're able to make space for others, the more the tapestry comes alive. Because it's no longer about like, I want to make it this way. This is my project. You have to come along with me. But it becomes more of this availability to what's actually present. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I feel like this is a nice little place to wind down. I want to just take a moment to close with a gratitude practice. So, thank you, first of all, to Jonathan for being here with us today and joining us. And, sort of closing as we began with the grounding and the breath. So, just really feeling our breaths and our bodies once more on this earth, wherever you are. And gratitude to all of our teachers, some of that we've named today, all the teachers we haven't named. Gratitude to our queer community and our queer ancestors, wise and well, and all the elements. Gratitude to collaboration, especially the collaboration of the cosmos around us that has created this world that we're able to live on. And gratitude for anything else that I'm forgetting right now. So thank you. So, Jonathan, before we let you go, I wonder if you just want to share again with our listeners about your podcast and where they can find it or where they can connect with you.
Sure. My podcast is called Healing the Spirit. You can find it anywhere you find podcasts. And I share contemplations inspired by the astrology and the energy of the week every Monday. And usually, sometime during the week, I also share some conversations. And yeah, folks can also reach out to me for one-on-one support and readings. I often share courses and classes and yeah, find out all the ways to work with me if you are feeling the resonance. What about you, Nick and Tanya Mark?
Our show is called the Queer Spirit Podcast, and you can also find it wherever you find your podcasts. And Tanya Mark, do you want to share about our circles?
Yeah, we are queer care circles. We offer a first Saturday morning, 9:30 a.m. PST circle where you can come in and breathe and move and be in community. And we also have a circle on the third Sunday of the month called Chanting and Breathwork and Movement, where we chant together and move together and spend some time in community exploring care. So please join us. They're virtual, they're free, and really just an opportunity for us to come together and explore care and community.
And our IG is the Queer Spirit.
Awesome. Is there any way that listeners can support your podcast?
Yes, they can listen and like and review. And if you want, you can go to our website, which is thequeerspirit.com. And if you want to offer any kind of financial energy exchange, there are links there where you can also contribute.
Awesome.
And my response,
both.
I might
This
say
is-
something. We love to be invited to share what we do on other podcasts. So should anyone be listening and think, hell yeah, we want John, you want all three of us? Do you want one of us? Do you want both of us? We are available. That's what I say.
Thank you, Tanya Mark. I love that. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for being here and being with us today.
Thank you all. Thank you for listening. And thank you both for being here with me.
Resources that we shared today can be found in our show notes and at thequeerspirit.com.
You're invited to follow our show on Apple Podcasts or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time, much love and blessings. Aho.